Antarctica wasn't always frozen. Before the snow, before the silence, there was life. Lush, wild, unimaginable. Rainforests, rivers, volcanoes, towering trees and giant ferns. Strange creatures crawling through swamps. Dinosaurs hunting in the daylight. This was Antarctica before the freeze. Forget the icy desert, you know. We're going back, way back, 500 million years, to the very start, when Antarctica was alive. This series is a time machine, one forgotten world. We're digging through layers of rock and ice, finding clues, bones, fossils, forests, footprints, echoes of a world erased, but not forgotten. If you're ready to see Antarctica like you've never seen it before, subscribe now. Because what we're about to uncover has been buried for 500 million years, and it's going to blow your mind. You'll meet the first creatures to crawl on land. Armored fish, toothy predators, giant bugs. You'll witness continents collide, Gondwana rising, land splitting apart, climate turning wild. Forests become swamps. Swamps become deserts. Deserts become glaciers. And just like that, Antarctica dies. But under the ice, it remembers. Scientists are peeling it back, one fossil at a time, one core sample at a time. And what they're finding? It's rewriting everything. We thought we knew Earth's history. We didn't. We thought we knew Antarctica. We were wrong, because it was never just ice. It was never just penguins. It was a cradle of life, a battlefield of survival. This isn't just a documentary. It's a resurrection. The ancient creatures are coming back, not in flesh, but in story. Their bones speak. Their world rises again. And it has a lot to say. About evolution, about extinction, about what happens when the planet flips the script. Because here's the twist. The ice is melting. That world is waking up, and with it secrets. Secrets that could change our future. This is more than history. It's a warning. It's a mirror. The past doesn't stay buried forever. So what will you see? Life. Before time. Before memory. Before the deep freeze. The monsters. The marvels. The migrations. The rise and fall of an ancient kingdom. A kingdom beneath your feet. Hidden under miles of ice. Waiting to be heard. So buckle up. The ice is cracking. The past is rising. And this is the story of the world. Antarctica used to be. Before Antarctica was cold, it was on the move. Not a land of ice. A land on fire. Shifting, breaking, becoming. This isn't just a continent. It's a puzzle piece. One that drifted across the planet for hundreds of millions of years. And it didn't always sit at the bottom of the world. Let's go back. Way back. 700 million years ago. No ice. No poles. Just supercontinents. Massive chunks of land. Crashing into each other. Merging, colliding, breaking apart again. Antarctica was part of them all. Rodinia, then Pannotia, then Gondwana. With each breakup, it moved. With every collision, it changed. Mountains rose. Volcanoes erupted. Oceans swallowed coastlines. Land was crushed, folded, buried. The ground beneath Antarctica was never still. It was alive. And in that chaos, life took root. But this land, it didn't begin frozen. It began in the tropics. You read that right. Tropics. This place sat near the equator. covered in warm seas, coral reefs, and shallow coastlines. The perfect nursery for early life. Tiny organisms swam these waters. Algae, worms, soft-bodied things. No eyes, no bones, just instincts. But they were the pioneers. Then boom, something changed. Evolution hit the gas. The Cambrian explosion, 500+ million years ago. Life got bold. Life got weird. Antarctica's seas filled with trilobites, armored, alien-looking scavengers. Some with spines, some with horns, all crawling through the mud. Predators showed up. Anomalocarisgiant, swimming nightmares with razor limbs. Nothing had teeth yet, but trust us, things still got eaten. This was Antarctica's first known ecosystem. Small, simple, brutal, but everything had to start somewhere. And Antarctica? It was just getting warmed up. Time passed. Millions of years. Land rose from the ocean. The continent took shape. Forests spread. Rivers carved valleys. Mountains reached for the sky. Dinosaurs were still a distant dream. But life kept adapting. Every layer of rock laid down in this time is a chapter, a memory, a clue. And these clues are buried deep under the glaciers we see today. So scientists dig, they drill, they analyze, they find fossils where there should be none. Proof that this frozen wasteland was once a lush, thriving cradle of life. Here's the twist. Antarctica wasn't alone. It was surrounded, connected to Africa, South America, India, and Australia, all fused into one, Gondwana. This mega-continent was a powerhouse. It ruled the southern half of Earth, and Antarctica was its heart. No ice caps, no penguins, just life. Hot, messy, chaotic life. And when Gondwana broke apart, Antarctica was cut off, alone, adrift, and slowly freezing. But that part's coming later. Right now, remember this. Antarctica was never dead. It was never just ice. It was a wanderer, a shapeshifter, a survivor, and beneath that thick white shell, its ancient story still breathes. Picture Antarctica not white, not frozen, but green, thick with trees, buzzing with bugs, flooded with rivers and swamps. Hard to believe, right? But that's exactly what it looked like around 400 million years ago. Welcome to the Devonian Periodica, the age of fishes. But forget just fish. This was the age when plants took over the land. And Antarctica joined the party. Back then, the continent was parked closer to the equator. No glaciers, no endless night, just long, humid days, and a climate that supported wild, untamed life. Ferns grew tall. Trees with no flowers or leaves dominated the skyline. Early vascular plants, no seeds, yet just spores riding the wind. It was green chaos. Below the canopy, the ground was alive. Insects crawled everywhere. Giant millipedes longer than your arm. Early arachnids with 8 twitching legs. Some of the first land predators in history. Yeah, you'd think twice before lying in that grass. And nearby water. Endless rivers. Swamps teeming with movement. This is where things get fishy. Literally. The oceans were already wild. But in these freshwater systems, something incredible happened. Fins turned to legs. Gills gave way to lungs. Fish started walking. Tiktaalik, Panderichthys. These weren't just weird names. They were the bridge, the link between water and land. Antarctica was one of their stages. Imagine it. A muddy shoreline. A lobe-finned fish drags itself onto land. Just for a second. That tiny moment would shape every animal to come, including us. It wasn't just about survival. It was evolution in real time. And the bones of these pioneers? They're still trapped in the rocks of Antarctica, waiting to be found. Scientists have uncovered fossilized forests here. Perfect imprints of roots, bark, and trunks. Proof that trees once grew where only ice stands today. They've even found tree rings. Not annual ones like we get today, but growth spurts triggered by sunlight during polar summers. These trees were tough, adapted to darkness, built for extreme seasons. Antarctica didn't just survive the Devonian, it thrived in it. But this paradise had a countdown. Something massive was coming. The Devonian ended with a bang. A mass extinction. Life in the oceans collapsed. Coral reefs vanished. Whole species blinked out. The land fared better, but barely. And yet, Antarctica endured. It held onto its forests. It kept its rivers. It carried its story forward. What's wild is how many people still think Antarctica has always been frozen, like it's some lifeless backdrop. But this period proves otherwise. The continent was a player, a cradle of change, a launch pad for land life. You wouldn't recognize it now, but you owe it everything. Because without those walking fish, none of us would be here. Now we enter the Carboniferous. Roughly 359 to 299 million years ago. And things get weird. Dark. Massive. Alien. Antarctica wasn't a wasteland. It was a swampy jungle. So thick you could barely see the sky. So humid the air felt like soup. So oxygen-rich it supercharged life to insane levels. You breathe 21% oxygen today. Back then, it was over 30%. And that changed everything. Insects grew massive. Meganeura, dragonfly, with a wingspan longer than your arm. Arthroplura, millipede, as long as a car. Creatures that don't exist anymore, because they literally couldn't survive in today's thinner air. But in Carboniferous Antarctica, they thrived. This wasn't just some scattered jungle. It was a coal factory. Thick forests of giant club mosses, seed ferns, and towering horsetails. Trees that didn't flower, didn't produce fruit, but stood tall 30 meters or more. Their fallen trunks piled up in bogs. Over time, all that plant matter didn't decompose. It compressed and formed coal. The very coal humans would burn millions of years later. Yes, your lights might literally be powered by ancient Antarctic trees. But there's more. This was also a time of supercontinents. Antarctica wasn't alone. It was tucked into Gondwana, connected to Africa, South America, Australia, and India. Life moved freely. Species didn't belong to one place. They spread, adapted, conquered. Amphibians ruled the swamps. Early reptiles emerged. Eggs became a thing. Huge deal. No more needing to lay them in water. Now creatures could roam far, wide, dry. Antarctica was in the mix. Every major move in evolutionary history this continent was part of it. But then things shifted. Literally. The Earth's plates moved. Climates changed. Glaciers started creeping in from the south. Swamps dried. Forests thinned. The oxygen bubble burst. Those giant bugs? Gone. They couldn't shrink fast enough. They collapsed under their own size, like titans falling one by one. The forests didn't die overnight, but their world cracked open. The dense, green, monster-filled Antarctica faded, and ice began whispering its way in. Still, this time left scars. Coal beds, fossilized trees, imprints of bugs too big to imagine. Proof that this place once pulsed with prehistoric life. The Carboniferous wasn't just wild, it was critical. This is where nature experimented with size, with oxygen, with life on land. And Antarctica? It wasn't just watching, it was hosting the show. Next, things get colder, darker. Antarctica begins its slow, icy transformation during the Permian period. Welcome to the Permian. 299 to 252 million years ago. The final chapter before everything broke. Antarctica was still part of Gondwana, still hugged by Africa, India, and Australia. Still full of life, but it was changing. Gone were the swampy jungles. Gone were the massive insects. The air wasn't as rich. The planet was cooling, drying. Forests turned into scrublands. Lush greens faded into tougher, spikier plants. Life was adapting or dying. Antarctica began moving south, closer to the pole. Winters got longer. Summers got shorter. Glaciers teased the edges. But here's the twist. Life didn't give up. It fought back. Enter the early therapsids. Half reptile, half mammal. Some looked like lizards. Others, like weird dogs with crocodile faces. These were the ancestors of mammals. Our ancestors. Creatures like Lystrosaurus, a tusked, beaked herbivore, built like a barrel with legs. It was tough, stubborn, and could dig burrows to survive the cold. And it thrived in Antarctica. We found its fossils across the continent, even in places that would have been buried in ice half the year. Why? Because it adapted. It learned how to survive in extreme seasons, to hibernate, to keep moving, to keep eating when everything else went silent. But not everything made it. The Permian was a slow, creeping death. Volcanoes in Siberia erupted nonstop for thousands of years. Ash and gas blanketed the sky. Oceans turned acidic. Air grew toxic. Earth's temperature soared, then crashed, then soared again. A climate roller coaster of death. And then it hit. The Great Dying, the worst extinction event in Earth's history. 96% of marine species gone. 70% of land animals wiped out. Entire ecosystems erased. Antarctica was not spared. Its forests vanished. Its reptiles disappeared. Even the mighty Lystrosaurus barely made it out. The continent began slipping into silence, into ice, into isolation. But in the ashes of extinction, something incredible happened. The survivors evolved. Faster, smarter, tougher. Lystrosaurus became a global conqueror. Post-extinction, its fossils appear everywhere. Antarctica, Africa, Asia. It spread like wildfire, proof that even in collapse, life finds a way. So what did the Permian teach us? That change doesn't always come with warning signs. That extinction can start slow and end fast. That even the strongest ecosystems can fall apart. But also, that Antarctica was more than ice. It was a battlefield, a proving ground, a stage for survival. This era closed the curtain on one age of life, but it opened the door to another. Because next comes the Triassic, the dawn of dinosaurs. And yes, they walked through Antarctica too. The world had burned. The Great Dying left silence. But out of that silence came footsteps. Small, fast, cold-blooded. The first dinosaurs. Welcome to the Triassic, 252 to 201 million years ago. Earth was rebuilding, and Antarctica still holding on. It wasn't the icy wasteland we know today. Far from it. Think red deserts, dry valleys, scattered rivers. More like modern-day Chile than the South Pole. Antarctica had moved closer to the bottom of the planet. Seasons were harsh, but life was relentless. Let's talk about the Protosaur revolution. These weren't your T-Rex level dinos. They were early models, smaller, quicker, built for survival. Creatures like Coelophysis, a fast bipedal carnivore. Sharp teeth, hollow bones. Think chicken-sized raptor, but meaner. Or Eoraptor, another early predator. Barely a meter long, but agile, cunning, and fierce. They hunted in packs, lurked in the shadows, and yes, some of their tracks have been found in Antarctica. But dinosaurs weren't the only players. Decinodonts still lingered. Herbivorous, tusked, dog-sized survivors from the Permian. They refused to go extinct. And then came the archosaurs, crocodile ancestors with long legs and deadly jaws. They ruled the rivers and plains. Fossils of early archosaurs in Antarctica prove one thing: this place wasn't a dead end. It was a crossroads, a testing ground for evolution. But the Triassic wasn't easy. The planet was still recovering. Volcanoes rumbled. Temperatures swung violently. Massive droughts scorched the land. To live here, creatures needed more than just strength. They needed timing, patience, adaptability. And that's exactly what Antarctica demanded. See, living near the South Pole even back then meant extremes. Months of darkness, months of light. Even without the ice, that rhythm was brutal. So who could handle it? The ones who burrowed, the ones who migrated, the ones who grew fast and bred faster. Nature wasn't just rewarding the strong, it was rewarding the smart. By the late Triassic, dinosaurs were starting to dominate. They outcompeted the older lineages. Faster metabolisms, better legs, smarter brains. And Antarctica was part of that rise. We've found their footprints in the rock. Proof they roamed these ancient southern lands. Proof they weren't just surviving, they were thriving. But then, boom, another extinction. The Triassic-Jurassic boundary. Volcanic eruptions tore Pangaea apart. Carbon dioxide levels soared. Half of all species vanished again. Once again, Antarctica watched the world burn. And once again, it didn't fall. The dinosaurs that survived, they were ready for something bigger. The next act in their saga. They'd grow larger, stronger, more terrifying. And Antarctica would be their hunting ground, their nesting site, their frozen kingdom long before it froze. This was the age of potential. The spark before the wildfire. The beginning of a reign that would last over 150 million years. Antarctica wasn't on the sidelines. It was in the thick of it. The southern edge of the dinosaur empire. You think of Antarctica, you think of snow, ice, blizzards, brutal cold. But 180 million years ago, it was a jungle. Yasan actual breathing, dinosaur-filled rainforest. Welcome to the Jurassic. The age of giants. Pangaea had cracked open. Antarctica drifted further south, but it wasn't frozen yet. Not even close. Volcanoes still smoked across Gondwana. CO2 levels were sky high. And that meant one thing: warmth. Antarctica was humid, dense with trees. Thick canopies blocked out the sun. Ferns, mosses, conifers forests stretched for miles. And towering through that greenery, sauropods, long-necked, whip-tailed behemoths. They ruled the land like walking skyscrapers. Imagine Glacialosaurus. Yes, it lived here. Its name literally means frozen lizard, even though it lived in a rainforest. It was 20 feet long, weighed nearly a ton. A plant-eating tank built to move slow and eat non-stop. Or Cryolophosaurus, different beast entirely. The frozen crested lizard, one of Antarctica's first known predators. Sharp teeth, long legs, and a bony crest above its eyes like a mohawk. Terrifying, fast, and deadly. These weren't flukes. They were locals. Cryolophosaurus fossils were pulled from Mount Kirkpatrick, a mountain buried under 13,000 feet of ice. Meaning, even the highest peaks were once dinosaur playgrounds. But here's the kicker. These creatures thrived in darkness. See, even without the cold, Antarctica still had one wild cardpolar night. Months without sunlight. An entire winter of darkness. Yet the forest stayed alive. And so did the dinos. Some scientists think the plants adapted, first evolving to photosynthesize fast when the light returned. Others believe the dinosaurs had internal clocks, built for extreme seasonal shifts. Either way, they endured. Even the rivers swarmed with life. Freshwater fish, amphibians, early reptiles. The ecosystem was booming. Antarctica wasn't just alive, it was teeming. But it wasn't paradise. Tectonic chaos was brewing. As continents drifted apart, rifts opened. Volcanic eruptions pumped more gases into the atmosphere. Sea levels rose. Ecosystems shifted. New dinosaurs entered the scene. Theropods, ceratosaurs, each faster, leaner, and more specialized. Herbivores grew armor. Predators grew smarter. And in the middle of it all, Antarctica adapted. Cryolophosaurus was a perfect example. Its fossils show it lived not only in cold light, but total darkness. Its body was optimized to hunt in low-light jungles. Think about that. It wasn't just surviving, the extreme sit evolved for them. This was the turning point. The Jurassic transformed Antarctica into a biological laboratory, where plants raced to grow faster, where dinosaurs adapted to the dark, where size meant everything and nothing. Because while giants ruled the canopy, smaller species thrived in the underbrush. Insects, early mammals, small lizard screechers with quick legs and quicker minds. They were waiting, learning, preparing for their time. But for now, the giants ruled. Their footsteps shook the ground. Their shadows stretched across endless green. It's almost impossible to believe. But the coldest place on Earth was once a lush, thriving jungle. A prehistoric Eden lost under ice. The only evidence left? Fossils buried beneath glaciers. Wood turned to stone. Teeth, bones, footprints, frozen echoes of the past. Antarctica remembers. Even if we almost forgot. Time's running out. The climate's shifting. Continents are drifting farther apart. Volcanic activity is ramping up. And Antarctica is cooling. But not dead. Not yet. Welcome to the Cretaceous period. 100 million years ago. The last chapter before the ice takes over. This is a period of survival, of adaptation, of quiet genius. Antarctica is no longer tropical, but it's not frozen either. Think cool forests, seasonal snow, long, dark winters, short, intense summers. And in this twilight zone, evolution gets clever. Let's start with the polar dinosaurs. Yes, polar. These weren't visitors. They lived here, through the cold, through the dark, through months without sunlight. They weren't massive sauropods or thunder-footed tyrannosaurs. Nope. These were small, smart, and fast. Meet Leolinosaura. Big eyes, even bigger brain, roughly the size of a turkey. But don't laugh. This dino was built for the cold. Its large optic lobes meant it could see in near total darkness. Its long tail may have helped with balance as it darted through snow-laced forests. It wasn't just surviving the polar night. It was owning it. And then there's Koolasuchus, an amphibian the size of a car. Basically, a walking nightmare of slime and jaws. It ruled the rivers, lurking in cold streams, waiting to snap up anything that moved. And here's the twist. Antarctica was turning into a nursery. Fossil evidence shows dinosaurs were nesting here. Yep, in the cold. They laid eggs, built nests, raised their young right in the shadows of the poles. It's wild. How did they do it? One theory, they were warm, blooded, endothermic, not like lizards, more like birds. Some even had proto-feather-searly fuzz, not for flying, but for insulation. Little parkas for baby dinosaurs. And the plants? Still hanging on. Mosses, ferns, hardy conifers. The last green breath of Gondwana. But make no mistake, things were getting colder. Winters were longer. Snowfall crept in. The forests thinned. Species began to vanish. One by one. Some migrated. Some adapted. Most didn't make it. But a few, those small, clever ones, held on. The Cretaceous in Antarctica wasn't about domination. It was about resilience. How long can you survive when the world is turning against you? The last dinosaurs here weren't kings. They were fighters, mothers shielding eggs, young ones learning to hunt in the dark, entire species clinging to the edge of existence. And somewhere, quietly, mammals were stirring. Tiny, nocturnal, fast, learning to live in the cold shadows the giants left behind. By the time the asteroid hit, Antarctica was already halfway frozen. But these creatures had written their story long before extinction came knocking. They didn't go out with a bang. They faded into the snow. What's left now? Fossils locked in rock and ice. Buried nests. Tooth marks. Eggshells. Little whispers from a time when life refused to quit. It didn't happen overnight. But when it did, it changed everything. Antarctica began to die. Not in a fiery cataclysm. Not with an asteroid. But with silence. A slow, creeping freeze. That stole color, then light, then life. We've hit the end of the Eocene epoch around 34 million years ago. This is the tipping point. The moment Earth pivots hard toward ice. And Antarctica? She's the first to feel it. But why? Let's rewind. For millions of years, Antarctica sat cozy in the southern hemisphere, part of a lush green network of continents. Gondwana's crown jewel. But tectonic plates were always moving. Australia drifted north. South America broke away. And a gap opened between Antarctica and its neighbors. That's when it happened. The Antarctic Circumpolar Current was born. A powerful ocean current that wrapped around the continent like a ring of cold steel. No warm waters could reach it anymore. Antarctica was isolated, cut off, surrounded by spinning cold, and it started to freeze. Fast. Forests died first. The last green things gave way to lichen and moss. Then came the snow. Then the ice sheets. Glaciers formed, crawled outward, merged. Soon, Antarctica was white. Permanently, life had to make a choice: adapt, flee, or die. Most fled, or went extinct. Gone were the dinosaurs. Gone were the polar marsupials. Even the once dominant plants vanished beneath meters of snow. And yet some things stayed. Deep in the Southern Ocean, life persisted. Tiny krill, cold-hardened fish, creatures that didn't need light or warmth, just pressure, salt, and silence. Some marine mammals adapted too. Early whales, like Basilosaurus, once tropical, began to favor colder seas. They evolved into sleeker forms, faster swimmers, better lungs. The ancestors of today's seals, penguins, and sea lions were on the move. They saw opportunity in the frozen silence. They found safety in what others feared. Above the ice, birds ruled, but not the tropical flocks of the past. These were early penguins, flightless, armored with blubber and feathers. The size of humans in some cases, like Anthropornis, a penguin that stood over 6 feet tall. They didn't fly. They dove. And they feasted in icy waters no other bird dared to touch. Below the ice, a hidden kingdom. Jellyfish, sponges, sea spiders, creatures that glowed in the dark and moved without sound. The ecosystem flipped, no longer driven by sunlight and plants, but by darkness and ice. This was now a cold-blooded world. Earth itself shifted. CO2's levels dropped. Volcanic activity slowed. Rainforests collapsed elsewhere, too. And Antarctica became the center of a brand new Planetan Ice Age planet. It marked the birth of a new climate order. The cooling would spread north. Glaciers would march across continents. Sea levels would rise and fall like breath. Antarctica had become a global thermostat. The ice here dictated life everywhere else. The Big Freeze didn't just transform Antarctica. It redefined Earth itself. A frozen landmass now held the keys to sea levels, ocean currents, and atmospheric rhythms. And inside that ice, trapped forever, were echoes of every creature that once walked its green lands. Fossils, air bubbles, ancient pollen, proof that this wasteland was once a live lush, wild, untamed. Now, it sleeps. But it never forgets. There's a world beneath the ice, and it's alive with secrets. Not metaphorically, literally. Antarctica's thick, frozen skin holds ancient memories. Locked away, preserved, waiting. We're talking about 3-mile-thick ice sheets, pressing down on everything below them. You might think it's just lifeless rock under there. Nope. Let's start with the ice itself. Every layer is a snapshot, a time-stamped page in Earth's diary. Snow falls, compresses, freezes sand, traps tiny pockets of air. Those air bubbles? They're the actual atmosphere from hundreds of thousands of years ago. Carbon dioxide levels, methane, dust, even volcanic ash. It's climate data you can hold in your hand. Some ice cores go back 800 years. Others might go back millions. Scientists drill deep into the ice, and what they pull up is nothing short of magic. They can tell you when Earth had its warmest summers, or coldest winters, when wildfires raged or volcanoes exploded. Each speck of ash, each gas pocket, each grain of pollinate, all tells a story. But ice cores are just the beginning. Beneath the glaciers lie subglacial lakes. Yes, lakes. Liquid water, trapped under ice, unexposed to the surface for over 1 million years. Lake Vostok is the most famous. It's the size of Lake Ontario, buried under 2.5 miles of ice. And it's warm. How? Geothermal heat from the Earth's core, enough to keep the water liquid despite the crushing cold above. But here's the crazy part: scientists found life in these lakes. Microbes, alive, feeding on minerals, thriving in complete darkness. No sunlight, no oxygen, no surface contact, just raw survival. This flipped the script on everything we thought we knew about life. It meant life could exist in the most extreme, isolated conditions imaginable. And if life could exist here, it could exist on Europa, on Enceladus, on Mars. Antarctica became a blueprint for alien ecosystems. But let's go deeper. Under the ice lies an entire lost landscape. Mountains, canyons, riverbeds, an ancient ecosystem flattened by time and frost. Scientists use radar to map these features. What they've found is staggering. There are rivers still flowing beneath the ice sheets, valleys deeper than the Grand Canyon, buried forests, even hints of microbial ecosystems completely sealed off for millions of years. Imagine a tree fossil under a mile of ice, still intact, still telling the story of a continent that once teemed with green. There's also meteorites. Antarctica is the best place on Earth to find them. Why? Because when a space rock lands, it doesn't sink or get buried in dirt, it just waits. And the ice carries it slowly to the surface over time. Thousands have been found, some from Mars, some from the Moon, some older than Earth itself. The ice isn't just preserving Earth's past, it's holding pieces of the cosmos. But we're running out of time. The ice is melting, faster than ever. These secrets, frozen for millennia, are beginning to surface. And we have one chance to catch them before they're gone. Before that pristine ancient air escapes. Before microbial ecosystems get contaminated. Before history melts into the ocean and disappears forever. Antarctica is speaking, but not in words, in chemical signatures, in buried fossils, in pressure readings and microscopic life. It's whispering the history of a planet and the potential of others. We just have to listen before the silence takes over again. Before Antarctica was a frozen wasteland, it was wild, alive, and ruled by giants. Forget the ice. Roll back the clock 40 million years. What you'll find isn't a desert of snow, but a lush, green, forested continent crawling with massive beasts. Yes, megafauna, the same kind of monstrous mammals and towering birds that roamed South America, Australia, and Africa, also made their way south, to the land that would become Antarctica. The idea seems impossible today, but the fossil record doesn't lie. Let's talk about one of the stars of the South, Anthracobune. It looked like a hippo, walked like a tapir, and lived a semi-aquatic life right at the swampy edges of prehistoric Antarctica. Back then, rivers cut through dense forests, coastal plains buzzed with insects, and temperatures stayed mild year-round. Then came the terror birds, massive flightless predators that ruled the southern forests. Sharp beaks, long legs, and a hunger for meat. You did not want to be prey when these beasts were around. And it wasn't just birds. We had giant marsupials down here too. Think wombats the size of rhinos, koala-like creatures that could crush branches with a bite, massive herbivores that looked like they belonged in a fantasy novel. These weren't isolated oddities. They were part of a full ecosystem, a food chain, from insects and lizards all the way up to top predators. And it was stable, Until everything changed. Enter the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. When Antarctica split from South America and Australia, a massive ocean current formed around it. It wrapped the continent in a freezing belt of water, like an icy force field. That current cut off warm ocean flows, and the temperature? It plummeted. Forests died. Grasslands withered. Rain turned to snow. Snow turned to ice. One by one, the megafauna disappeared. Some adapted and fled to warmer continents. Others just didn't make it. But here's where it gets even wilder. Some of their fossils are still being found in Antarctica. Buried under rock, encased in sediment, frozen in time. In the 1980s, scientists found the fossil of a giant penguin over 6 feet tall. Yes, that's taller than most people. It lived during a time when Antarctica wasn't covered in ice, and it ruled the ancient southern seas. There were prehistoric dolphins, too, and massive whales that evolved as the continent cooled. Some of the earliest ancestors of modern whales may have passed through these southern waters, adapting to colder and colder conditions until they became what they are today. That makes Antarctica a missing link, a bridge between eras, and a hot spot for evolutionary change. Let's not forget the tree fossils. Yes, trees, petrified trunks, ancient roots, even fossilized leaves preserved so well, you can still see their veins. This wasn't a one-off. Entire forests once blanketed this place. And where there were forests, there were creatures giants of the land and sea. Antarctica was never just an empty slab of frozen nothing. It was a haven, a battleground, a cradle for colossal life forms we're only just beginning to understand. And now, as the ice retreats, the giants are coming back not to life, but into view. Bones, teeth, footprints. They're emerging from the melt, one by one, reminding us that Antarctica's frozen silence was once a roar. Imagine this. You're walking through a dense forest. Ferns tower above your head. Moss carpets the floor. A warm breeze rustles the ancient leaves. But this isn't the Amazon. This is Antarctica. Sounds insane, right? But 50 million years ago, Antarctica was green. Very green. Forests stretched from coast to coast. Trees grew tall near the South Pole. And the land we now call the bottom of the world was buzzing with life. Let's rewind to the Eocene epoch around 56 to 34 million years ago. Back then, Antarctica was still connected to other continents. Australia, South America, even a distant cousin connection to Africa. The temperatures? Mild, subtropical in some regions. Yes, there were palm trees near the pole. That's because the climate was globally warmer. No permanent ice caps. No frozen deserts. Just endless green. And in this green world lived a massive variety of plants and trees. Not just scrubs or tundra brush. Real forests. There were beech trees, southern conifers, ginkgos, ferns the size of grown humans. And they weren't just existing, they were thriving. Fossils show tree rings that point to year-round growth. That means no freezing winters, no long periods of darkness and death. This was a fully functioning ecosystem, complete with insects, fungi, and animals that lived among the trees. In fact, one of the wildest discoveries came from the Transantarctic Mountains. Scientists found fossilized tree trunks still rooted in the soil they grew in, frozen in place for over 40 million years. Talk about time travel. And then there's the leaf litter. Preserved so well, you can still see the veins and structures. They tell us about humidity, rainfall, even seasonal shifts. One leaf can speak volumes. A forest, that's a whole history book. We also know that Antarctica supported wetlands, marshes, rivers, even swamp-like areas. Think more like the Pacific Northwest than a frozen wasteland. And the biodiversity? Next level. Pollen fossils show hundreds of flowering plant species. This wasn't just a place to pass through, it was a destination, a refuge for prehistoric life. But just like that, it changed. Plate tectonics pulled Antarctica away from its neighbors. Ocean currents shifted. The Antarctic circumpolar current began to isolate the continent, and the first ice started to form. It didn't happen overnight, but slowly, steadily, the forests died. Leaves fell and never grew back. The canopy gave way to snow. Rain turned to sleet. And the green faded to white, but not completely. Even today, scientists are finding pollen embedded in the ice. Tiny time capsules from a forest long gone. Proof that once long before humans, Antarctica was alive, in a way we can barely imagine. And here's the kicker. Some of that ancient DNA may still be usable. Imagine sequencing genes from plants that haven't existed for 30 million years. Could we grow them again? Could the green return? Some scientists think it's possible, at least in controlled environments. But one thing's for sure. These forests weren't a fluke. They were the foundation of Antarctica's ecosystem. And they left behind a legacy, buried under miles of ice. Every time a glacier melts, the ground tells a new story. Of roots, of life, of a continent that once breathed green. Before the ice swallowed the land, before trees withered and winds howled, there were bugs. Lots of them. Antarctica wasn't just green, it was alive with movement. Tiny creatures skittering, flying, burrowing beneath ancient foliage. If you looked closely, you'd see an entire hidden world operating underfoot. Let's talk about the forgotten rulers of prehistoric Antarctica. Insects. When forests dominated the landscape, insects were everywhere. Not the few scattered mites we see today, but ecosystems full of crawling life. We're talking ancient beetles, giant ants, early wasps and flies, even moths and butterflies flitting between flowering plants. These insects weren't just side characters. They were vital. Pollinators, decomposers, food for amphibians, reptiles, and early birds. The entire ecosystem depended on them. And here's the wild part, we're still finding their traces. Fossilized leaf litter from Antarctica contains tiny insect burrows, perfectly preserved impressions. Even traces of insect poop, yeah, you read that right. They tell us these bugs were thriving, not just surviving. Their tunnels show complex behavior. Some were clearly social insects. Others were solitary but vital to the plant cycles around them. One of the biggest clues comes from ancient pollen grains. They're scattered in strange, unnatural clusters. That's a calling card of insect pollination, not wind. It means bugs were actively collecting and spreading plant life. Beetles, especially, were everywhere. They loved the rotting logs and moist underbrush. And based on the fossil record, some may have been huge by today's standards. We've also found pieces of ancient insect wings, delicate veins frozen in time. Proof that even in the southernmost corner of the world, nature flew free. Now, what happened to them? When the climate cooled, things got brutal. Fast. As temperatures dropped, these insects lost their safe haven. The plants they depended on vanished. Predators disappeared. The soil froze. And one by one, they were wiped out. But not all of them. A handful of species survived, clinging to life in microclimates. And one in particular is a legend in the science world. Meet Belgica antarctica, the Antarctic midge. This tiny flightless insect is the largest land animal on the continent today. It's only about 0.2 inches long, but it's the last echo of a once thriving insect empire. Belgica doesn't fly. It crawls, lives under rocks, and has superpowers. It can survive being frozen for weeks, dehydrate itself to avoid cell damage, slow its metabolism to near death. Basically, it's the ultimate survivor. But it's not just a freak of nature. It's a living clue, a genetic fossil, one that hints at what life used to look like here. Its DNA might carry fragments from ancestors that lived in those lush, ancient forests. In fact, researchers believe Belgica's lineage dates back millions of years, perhaps even to the time when Antarctica was teeming with green. So, the next time someone tells you Antarctica is barren, tell them about the bugs. Tell them about the winged rulers of the frozen forest. About beetles carving tunnels into prehistoric wood. About butterflies sipping nectar under the polar sun. About a midge that refuses to die. Because even in the harshest environments, life finds a way. And in the deepest layers of ice, the tiniest fossils remind us. Antarctica was once crawling with life. Before the frost, before the silence, Antarctica had a voice. It roared. This place we now see as lifeless and white, it was once crawling storming with reptilian predators. Big ones, fast ones. Some that hunted in packs. Some that slithered unseen in swamps and forest shadows. Let's rewind the clock way back to the Triassic and early Jurassic periods. Antarctica wasn't an icy wasteland. It was warm, lush, and very alive. Forests of tree ferns and towering conifers blanketed the land. And beneath that canopy, monsters moved. At the top of this food chain, a group of early archosaurs, ancestors of both dinosaurs and crocodiles. These were not just primitive creatures, they were elite hunters. They filled the roles wolves, lions, and raptors play today. Picture this: a 5-meter-long beast, jaws lined with dagger teeth, tearing through the brush. That's Cryolophosaurus, the so-called Elvosaurus, due to the crest on its head. Discovered in the Transantarctic Mountains, it's the first carnivorous dinosaur ever found on the continent. And it was a game changer. Cryolophosaurus shattered the myth that dinosaurs couldn't thrive near the poles. It showed us that some dinos weren't just surviving the cold, they were ruling it. And it wasn't alone. Antarctica's fossil beds tell of prosauropods, early long-necked herbivores, and theropods, smaller carnivores built for speed and agility. They carved trails through dense forests, tracked prey through riverbeds, and maybe even hunted at night under the polar stars. These reptiles weren't just cold-blooded killers. They were adaptable. The Earth was already cooling. Seasonal darkness hit parts of Antarctica for months. Yet these reptiles pushed through. Some may have hibernated. Others evolved insulation, behaviors, or migration patterns. We also find hints of ancient pseudosuchians, early relatives of crocodiles. They weren't the swamp lizards we know today. Some were fully terrestrial, faster, meaner, built to chase down prey on land. And then there were the herbivores. Not soft targets, but tank-like survivors. Thick hides, bony plates, powerful limbs. They fed on ancient ferns, used tail clubs for defense, and left behind footprints still frozen in stone. But what's truly wild? These predators and prey weren't exclusive to Antarctica. They shared their genes with creatures in South America, Africa, and Australia. Proof that Antarctica was once the beating heart of supercontinent Gondwana. A land bridge. A prehistoric freeway for reptiles to spread and evolve across the planet. It connected ecosystems, merged species, allowed for epic evolutionary showdowns. And then, it all changed. As the climate shifted, the forests thinned. Glaciers crept in. One by one, the cold-blooded kings disappeared. But their bones remained, trapped beneath ice and rock, waiting. And now, we're uncovering them. Fossils that still show tooth marks from old battles. Skeletons curled in their death pose. Clues to how these creatures hunted, fed, lived, and died. It's like cracking open the ultimate cold case. Except instead of one victim, we're resurrecting an entire lost world. So the next time someone talks about reptiles basking in tropical heat, tell them about Antarctica, where dinosaurs stalked in the snow, and reptiles ruled the southernmost edge of the earth. Because the cold didn't kill the roar, it just buried it. Long before Antarctica turned silent, the skies above it were alive. With wings, with screeches, with creatures that defied gravity. This wasn't a land ruled only by beasts of the ground. Above the fern forests and muddy lakes, something else soared. Ancient flyers, pterosaurs, and the earliest birds. These weren't your average flapping pigeons. We're talking wingspans the size of SUVs, beaks like spears, eyes sharp enough to catch a shimmer in a river from a mile up. They were hunters, scavengers, survivors. Let's start with the stars of the Mesozoic skies, pterosaurs. Often mistaken for dinosaurs, but they're not. These winged reptiles had their own game. Hollow bones, membranous wings, and some of the weirdest headgear evolution ever came up with. Some had crests taller than their own skulls. Used to attract mates, maybe signal rivals, or maybe, just maybe, as aerial rudders to steer through high winds over Gondwana's southern edge. Antarctica's pterosaur fossils are rare, but they're real. Fragments pulled from ice-locked cliffs reveal they were here, flying over vast coastal wetlands, diving down to snatch fish from ancient rivers, gliding across thermal currents rising from dense jungles below. And they weren't alone up there. Because while the pterosaurs ruled the sky, something newer was emerging: birds. Fossils of early avians have shown up in Antarctica too. Primitive, feathered creatures, somewhere between raptor and robin. They still had teeth, clawed wings, more dragon than dove. But they were fast, agile, built for quick bursts and tight turns among trees. They weren't just gliding, they were flying. And they were adapting. See, even back then, Antarctica wasn't a walk in the park. Seasons hit hard. Darkness stretched for months. Temperatures dropped. But these flyers evolved with it. Some likely migrated, following the sun north during the darkest months. Others may have toughed it out, nesting in sheltered valleys, feeding on whatever they could find. It's possible early birds developed unique feathers to insulate against the cold. Some species may have even evolved dark pigmentation to absorb heat. It was survival in real time in the sky. And what about eggs? Buried fossilized nests tell us some of these flyers bred on Antarctic soil, which means they weren't just visitors. They called this place home. Imagine it, an ancient bird gliding through the canopy, weaving between conifer trunks, before diving to snap up an insect near a fern patch, then back to the nest tucked in the crook of a tree, hidden from hungry jaws below. These flyers didn't just survive Antarctica, they thrived in it. And just like their land-bound cousins, many of them weren't unique to this continent. Their closest relatives show up in South America and Australia. Proof again that Gondwana was once one vast neighborhood, a place where species flew across continents like they were suburbs. So what brought the flight to an end? Same thing that ended the rest of the Mesozoic. The KT extinction event. An asteroid. Darkness. Cold. Ecosystems collapsed. The sky went quiet. But not forever. Because one group of birds made it through. They adapted. They changed. They evolved. And now? They're chirping outside your window. Today's pigeons, hawks, and hummingbirds. All descendants of those prehistoric survivors that once soared above ancient Antarctica. They are echoes of a forgotten sky. When flight wasn't just survival, it was domination. You picture Antarctica and think, endless snow, frozen silence, desolate ice. But go back 100 million years, and you'd be standing at the edge of a thriving water world. Because under the thick canopy of ferns and towering trees, the land wasn't dry. It was veined with rivers, dotted with lakes, teeming with life. This was a freshwater paradise, and it had secrets. Big ones, slimy ones, ancient ones. Let's start with the waterways. Back then, Antarctica wasn't at the South Pole. It was farther north, connected to other continents. The temperatures were mild, the rainfall heavy, and the terrain rugged. All the right ingredients for massive river systems. These rivers weren't just scenic. They were lifelines. They fed vast deltas, carved deep channels, and flooded ancient floodplains. They connected forests, created boundaries, drew predators and prey alike. And beneath the surface, a whole world existed. Ancient fish species swam these waters armored, toothed, and alien. Think lungfish with the ability to breathe air, or coelacanth-like beasts, living fossils with jointed fins and primitive jaws. Some of these fish had barely changed in millions of years. They were relics from before dinosaurs even roamed. Then there were the amphibians. Huge ones. Forget frogs and newts. We're talking temnospondyls, crocodile-sized monsters with gaping mouths and ambush tactics. These beasts lurked near riverbanks, waiting in the shallows. Their skulls were flat like stepping stones, perfectly designed to stay hidden until something got too close. Splash, game over, and where there's water, there's drama. Rivers were hunting grounds, but they were also battlegrounds contested by predators, claimed by herds, and visited by flyers. Imagine this. A pack of Antarctic theropods prowling the river's edge. Their feathers slick from rain, eyes locked on the ripple of a fish below. Above, early birds dart from branch to branch. A giant amphibian bursts from the water, jaws wide. Chaos, screeches, splashes. Then silence again. It wasn't just about food. These waterways also shaped migration routes. Herbivores followed rivers as they moved between feeding grounds. Carnivores followed the herbivores. Flyers traced the path of the currents for easy navigation. And here's the kicker. Some of these rivers didn't disappear. They're still here, buried beneath miles of ice. Modern radar scans have revealed entire subglacial river systems, flowing in darkness, silent, ancient. Scientists believe these rivers may have been flowing uninterrupted for millions of years. Shielded by thick layers of ice, they've become time capsules. Locked in temperatures far below freezing, yet still moving. We've barely scratched the surface. But what we do know is this. Antarctica's frozen shell hides a watery past, a time when creatures crawled, slithered, and hunted through muddy currents. When rivers were roads, lakes were arenas, and water meant both life and death. It wasn't just a frozen wasteland waiting to be born. It was a hydrological kingdom, pulsing with energy and evolution. And if those ancient rivers could talk, they'd whisper stories of creatures that vanished, ecosystems that thrived, and worlds that were lost beneath a rising sheet of ice. The water may have frozen, but the stories still ripple through time. Forget the frozen desert you know today. Once upon a time, Antarctica belonged to cold-blooded royalty. Not just one or two. We're talking a whole caste of reptilian rulers. From lurking ambush predators to armored tank lizards, these creatures didn't just survive, they thrived. So let's dive into the swampy, steamy world of prehistoric Antarctic reptiles. First up, crocodilians. Yes, crocs. In Antarctica. It sounds insane, but it's true. Millions of years ago, long before the ice took over, ancient croc-like reptiles patrolled the rivers and wetlands here. These weren't your modern Nile crocs. They were ancestors. Some were fully aquatic, with paddle-like limbs and streamlined bodies. Others were terrestrial ambush predators, waiting in dense jungle shadows. Their bite was brutal, and their patience? Legendary. Imagine drifting through a marshy river in the ancient South. Suddenly, a log-shaped shadow explodes from the water. Teeth, thrashing, silence. That's how it went down. Then came the rhynchosaurs. Weird name, weirder look. Think stubby, beaked herbivores with a squat build and a snub-nosed face. They were armored and low to the ground, perfect for shuffling through the underbrush, ripping up ferns and cycads with those bizarre jaws. They weren't flashy, but they were everywhere. Rhynchosaurs ruled the plant-eater game for a chunk of time, and they were built like tanks with feet. Let's talk archosaurs. Not all of them flew or walked on two legs. Some stalked through Antarctic forests like prehistoric Komodo dragons. Low, slow, but absolutely lethal when provoked. These creatures are the ancestors of modern birds and crocs. But back then, they were their own beast. Fast, agile, brutal, and some of them were bipedal, standing upright, sprinting through wetlands with clawed toes and long snouts. Reptilian predators adapted for the chase. But nothing beats the proterosuchids. Long, lizard-like bodies, upturned jaws, a weird hybrid between crocodile and dragon. They looked like mistakes made by evolution, but in truth, they were survivors. They slithered through the Triassic forests and rivers like something out of a nightmare. Low to the ground, always lurking. These guys didn't just exist, they dominated early Antarctic ecosystems. What makes all of this insane? Antarctica was warm enough to support all of it. Dense forests, marshes, river deltas. A perfect home for reptiles that hated the cold. There were no polar ice caps. The continent sat farther north, and the climate was humid, swampy, rich in vegetation. The reptiles had no idea their paradise was temporary, because when the ice finally came, it didn't knock politely. It crushed, it erased. Forests turned to permafrost. Rivers froze solid. And the scaled kings were overthrown not by predators, but by temperature. Fossils are all that remain. Jawbones, teeth, footprints pressed into stone. Ghosts of a time when reptiles ruled the southernmost edge of the world. Every shard tells a story. Every fossil is a crown, left behind by cold-blooded monarchs who ruled a world we can barely imagine. They didn't need fire or flight, just swamps, heat, and time. Before penguins, before snowstorms, before the skies were empty and silent. Antarctica was full of wings. Yes, you read that right. There was a time when creatures ruled the air above this lost world. Feathers, skin membranes, wide wingspans. Some soared like shadows. Others darted like arrows. They weren't just surviving. They were thriving. Let's lift off into a prehistoric sky like no other. First, pterosaurs, the OG sky hunters. And some of them flew over Antarctica like it was their personal hunting ground. These weren't birds. They were flying reptiles. Think leathery wings, long beaks, and razor-sharp claws. They came in all sizes, from tiny bat-like creatures that flitted between trees to absolute units with wingspans rivaling small planes. Imagine one of those swooping low, skimming a lake, snatching a fish, gone before the water settles. Terrifying, majestic, airborne dominance. But Antarctica didn't just host predators. There were the early avians, feathered flyers, proto-birds that were just getting the hang of wings. Some had teeth, some had claws on their wings. Most were somewhere between dinosaur and bird, a transitional species still testing the sky. They weren't perfect, but they were determined. And their descendants? Well, they're sitting outside your window right now. Gliders deserve their spotlight too. Not everything with wings flew like a jet. Some creatures just needed enough air between them and the ground to coast. These were the stealth flyers. Stretch of skin, light bones, tree-to-tree movement, like flying squirrels on steroids. They didn't fly to hunt. They flew to escape. Fast, silent, uncatchable. They used the dense Antarctic forests like highways, launching, gliding, vanishing. The environment made it possible. Forget the frozen wasteland. Antarctica was once blanketed in trees, tall conifers, dense undergrowth, towering canopies, plenty of perches, plenty of launch points, a paradise for airborne species. With a warm, humid climate and an abundance of food sources, the skies were buzzing with activity. Insects, small lizards, fish, everything a sky predator could want. Here's the kicker: migration. Even back then, some flying creatures didn't stay in one place. They moved with the seasons, across Gondwana, across continents. That's right, prehistoric Antarctica was on a superhighway of flight. Evidence shows some species had the endurance to travel long distances, across jungles, over mountain ranges, even across vast stretches of proto-ocean. Sky kings and queens that didn't recognize borders. Then came the chill. The forests faded. The thermals died. The skies emptied. Winged creatures either fled or perished. Those who couldn't adapt to the cold went extinct. Those who could, evolved. The age of majestic flyers faded, and the silent snows took over. But the fossils tell the story. Bones light as air, teeth built for snatching, claws curved like grappling hooks. Proof that the Antarctic sky was once a battlefield, a stage, a hunting ground. They owned the wind, owned the trees, and for a time, they ruled the world above the ice. Before penguins waddled, before humans even dreamed of flight, these creatures danced in the clouds over the bottom of the world. The sky remembers. Before the silence, before the endless white, Antarctica had a sky full of wings, not snow, not ice. Feathers, membranes, flight. This frozen continent wasn't always grounded. It used to soar. Enter the pterosaurs. Not birds, not dinosaurs, but flying reptiles that dominated prehistoric skies. Some had wingspans of over 30 feet. Others were smaller, more agile. They ruled from above. Swooping, hunting, vanishing. Antarctica? It was their airstrip. Lakes, forests, and rivers provided all the takeoff zones they needed. Fish below, thermals rising. These beasts glided like ghosts. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving in the southern skies. Then came the feathered fringe, early avians, dinosaur bird hybrids. They weren't quite the robins outside your window, but they were working on it. Clawed wings, toothed beaks, feathers not just for flight, but for display, warmth, intimidation. They flapped through forests, nested in cliffs, and hunted in the canopy. Small, fast, unpredictable. They were rewriting the rules of evolution with every beat of their wings. Let's talk gliders. Not everything that flew, flapped. Some creatures just coasted. They launched from tall trees, stretched skin between limbs, caught the wind, and rode it like a current. Tree to tree, branch to bush. No sound, no warning. Escape artists, survivors, evolutionary pioneers. They didn't need speed, just silence and strategy. Why could so much fly here? Because Antarctica wasn't always a freezer. Picture this: lush forests, warm air, plentiful lakes. It was Gondwana's southern gem, a paradise for skyborne creatures. Tall trees gave launch points, thick foliage gave cover, and food everywhere. Insects, small reptiles, fish, a buffet for anything with wings. Migration matters. Some creatures didn't stay put. They flew seasonally, followed warmth, chased prey. Their fossils show links to South America, Australia, even Africa. The Antarctic sky was part of a massive prehistoric superhighway. Flyers weren't bound by borders. They moved with instinct and survival as their compass. Then came the cold, not all at once, but enough to change everything. Forests thinned, prey vanished. The thermals died. Flight became risk. Wings became dead weight. The ones who couldn't adapt disappeared. Others evolved. Feathers grew thicker. Flight paths shortened, or they gave up flying altogether. Some say this pressure helped birds become birds. Adapt or die. The ice may have taken the skies, but the fossils left stories. Hollow bones, wing claws, beaks still sharp after millions of years. Antarctica's sky wasn't always silent. It echoed with screeches, flaps, glides, dives. It was alive, and for a moment in time, the bottom of the world was ruled from above. Before Antarctica froze, it roared, not from glaciers cracking, but from jaws snapping, from claws ripping through ferns, from hunters staking their claim. This wasn't just a land of giants. It was a battlefield, and predators ruled every inch. Meet the titan of the south, Cryolophosaurus. A name that sounds like frostbutt. This was pure fire. 7 meters long, razor teeth, eyes built for the hunt, nicknamed the Elvisaurus for its funky head crest. But don't let that fool you. He wasn't here to perform. He was here to kill. This was Antarctica's top predator during the early Jurassic. Fast, agile, smart, and terrifying. He hunted early herbivores through thick forests, ambushed from shadows, used his powerful legs to chase, his jaws to finish. But he wasn't alone. There were smaller predators too. Pack hunters, scavengers, opportunists. Some sprinted on 2 legs. Others crept low on all 4s. Imagine a raptor scaled down, sharper, quicker, hunting in groups, tearing through nests, picking off the weak. Antarctica wasn't a walk in the snow. It was survival of the fastest. Now picture this. Not every predator needed to chase. Some waited, perfectly still, camouflaged in dense foliage. Early crocodilian ancestors. Cold-blooded, patient, lethal. They didn't bite first. They waited for a mistake. One slip. One drink at the wrong pond. Game over. The cold changed the game. As Antarctica drifted toward the pole, temperatures dropped. Forests shrank. Prey movetter died. Predators had a choice: adapt or vanish. Some did adapt. They grew feathers for insulation. They got smaller, lighter, faster. Others didn't. Fossils ended. Their stories stopped. Cryolophosaurus? Extinct. Gone with the warmth. But his legacy stayed. Predator fossils in Antarctica are rare, but they tell you everything. Bite marks on bones. Clawed footprints fossilized in mud. Fossils mid-chase predator and prey, frozen forever in time. They tell you who ruled, how they killed, where they died. This wasn't a forgotten corner of Earth. It was a theater of evolution. And here's the twist. Predators weren't just hunters. They were architects of balance. They kept herbivore numbers in check. They drove migrations. They triggered evolutionary arms races. One predator could change the ecosystem. One death could shift survival odds for everything else. Antarctica's apex killers weren't just monsters. They were the pulse of the wild. Today, that wild is under ice, but their bones still whisper, "I was here. I ruled. I ran this land." And for millions of years, they absolutely did. Think Antarctica was deadly on land? You haven't seen what swam below. Because while dinosaurs roamed the forests, something even scarier ruled the water. Not gentle giants, not pretty fish. These were monsters, real ones, with jaws that crushed bone, eyes that locked on prey, and no mercy. Meet the mosasaurs. If a crocodile had a baby with a torpedo, you'd get something close. 40 feet long, double-hinged jaws, rows of teeth curved backward so, once they bit you, there was no escape. They didn't just swim, they hunted. Faster than prey could react. They ambushed. They swallowed whole. And yes, fossils show they reached the waters around prehistoric Antarctica. But they weren't alone. Plesiosaurs lurked too. Long-necked, sharp-toothed nightmares. Picture a snake with flippers and an appetite. They use their necks like whips, snatching fish and squid in rapid strikes. Their flippers worked in perfect rhythm, gliding through the water like silent death. Some were small, some stretched longer than a school bus, but all of them were predators. And the apex of it all? Pliosaurs. Short necks, massive skulls, bite forces that rivaled a T-Rex. These were the ones that bit through shell, bone, and anything stupid enough to swim near them. Their jaws were thick, their bodies pure muscle. They didn't chase, they overwhelmed. A prehistoric apex predator that made oceans a horror zone. The ocean wasn't empty in Antarctica. It teemed with life. Squid-like cephalopods, armored fish, early sharks, and plenty of unlucky swimmers. Marine reptiles ruled for millions of years. Then the temperature began to drop. The oceans cooled. Species vanished. The giants disappeared. But some left pieces behind. Bones buried in the seafloor. Tooth marks on fossils. Fossilized stomach contents. We know what they ate. We know how they moved. We know what killed them. And the ecosystem? Brutal. There was no food chain. It was a food war. Top predators ate anything. Mid-tier creatures had to dodge both above and below. And prey? They evolved armor, speed, or stealth. Or they didn't survive at all. Some marine reptiles grew thicker skulls to survive ambushes. Some changed their diets to avoid bigger predators. Some migrated to safer zones until the ice came for everyone. But here's the twist. Antarctica's seas didn't die. As the reptiles vanished, something else rose. Birds, whales, seals, penguins. Modern marine life evolved from the ashes of the ancient world. But the blueprint, it came from these prehistoric hunters. The killer instincts, the streamlined bodies, the hunt or die mentality. All inherited, all shaped by the monsters that came before. Today, the ice covers it all. But under the shelves, under the cold, are the bones. Somewhere below, a perfect skull waits to be found. Teeth still sharp, still telling the story of a time when Antarctica's oceans weren't silent. They were filled with screams. Look up. Now imagine something the size of a car, with wings. Sharp-beaked, hollow-boned, and absolutely terrifying. Antarctica's prehistoric skies weren't empty. They were ruled by flying reptiles that weren't birds. They were pterosaurs, and they were monsters. These weren't cute gliders. They didn't flap politely through the air. They soared. They dove. They attacked. Quetzalcoatlus is the one you've heard about. As tall as a giraffe, wings stretching over 30 feet. But smaller cousins flew over ancient Antarctica, too. Ornithocarids, nyctosaurids, wings built for distance, skulls built for speed, and mouths packed with needle-like teeth to catch fish in a single snap. Antarctica gave them an edge. It was warmer back then. Forests, rivers, inland seas, perfect launching zones, plenty of prey. Pterosaurs nested on cliffs and hillsides. They spotted meals from miles away. They ruled above, while dinosaurs roamed below. And their wings? Made of skin, muscle, and strength. They weren't fragile. They were built to conquer. Fossils in the Vega Island region give us clues. Bone fragments, jaw tips, pieces of wings. Enough to prove they were here. Enough to map their flight paths. These pterosaurs weren't lost wanderers. They were part of the ecosystem. They fed on fish, squid, maybe even small land animals. Some soared like modern albatrosses. Others hovered, dove, and plucked prey from the sea. Their eyesight was next level. Their reflexes sharp. Their beaks deadly. But how did they survive in the cold? Here's the twist. They were warm-blooded. Yeah, science flipped the script. Turns out, many flying reptiles had fuzz pycnofiber's primitive insulation. Think of them like proto-feathers. That fuzz helped them retain heat, helped them live farther south than anyone thought possible. Even in the cold winds sweeping early Antarctica, they thrived. Predators above, hunters from the sky. Nothing was safe. You're a small dinosaur? Too slow swooped up. A fish near the surface? Gone in a flash. Pterosaur beaks weren't just stabbing tools. Some had crests to stabilize flight. Others used theirs for display. Territory disputes or full-on combat. Skies were battlefields. Wings crashed. Claws scratched. Teeth pierced. Their biggest threat? Time. Over millions of years, the climate shifted. The air thinned. Oceans cooled. Prey vanished. And slowly, the sky fell silent. Birds evolved and took over. Pterosaurs dwindled. their bones too fragile, often never fossilized. But the ones we've found, enough to remind us that Antarctica's skies once belonged to flying death. And here's the legacy. Birds aren't pterosaurs, but the idea of the sky as a hunting ground, that's ancient. Dive bombing tactics, aerial ambushes, gliding over oceans for miles, all began with them. Every gull, hawk, or penguin skimming Antarctic waters today owes something to those original Sky Kings. They weren't just first, they were dominant. Look up again. Imagine shadows blotting the sun, wings spread wide, eyes scanning the frozen expanse. Because once upon a time, Antarctica had dragons, and they ruled the wind. Boom, a flash, a roar, a world-ending event. 66 million years ago, an asteroid the size of a mountain slammed into Earth. Chicxulub. The skies burned, oceans boiled, and darkness swallowed the planet. The age of dinosaurs ended in an instant. But the story didn't. Especially not in Antarctica. It didn't escape the blast. Shockwaves reached the South Pole. Fires, ash, acid rain. A global winter that lasted years. Antarctica went silent. The forests froze. The rivers stopped. The last of the pterosaurs and non-avian dinosaurs vanished. But some things endured. Enter the survivors. Tiny, furry, fierce. Mammals. Not the giant creatures of the past. No thunderous footsteps. Just quiet, fast, and adaptable beings. Burrowers, climbers, foragers. Hiding underground. Feeding on seeds, insects, and roots. Holding on as the world reset. Some were marsupial-cereally ancestors of creatures like the opossum and kangaroo. Others were placental mammals building the blueprint for us. And then, slowly, the sun came back. The skies cleared. Temperatures rose. The ice melted for now. Antarctica bloomed again. Not the frozen desert we know today. It was still green, still alive. Forests of beech and conifers returned. Ferns unfurled. Swamps filled. A second Eden, but this time ruled by mammals. Predators evolved. Think ancient relatives of wolves. Fox-like hunters with sharp senses. Fast, smart, tactical. They hunted rodents and birds, descendants of the few species that outlived the extinction. And speaking of birds, they thrived. From ground runners to sky soarers, they exploded into every niche dinosaurs left behind. Some even grew massive terror birds. Yes, birds that hunted. And in the water, it wasn't just fish anymore. Early whales began to appear small, nimble, more like sea lions than today's giants. Penguins started showing up too. Only these weren't your tuxedoed friends. They were huge, over 6 feet tall. Predators with beaks sharp enough to pierce fish and even smaller penguins. And they loved Antarctic waters. Cold, rich in nutrients, perfect for hunting. This was a time of rebuilding, a slow, relentless evolution. The world had changed, and life adapted. No more giants thundering across the land. But a new kind of strength emerged on, rooted in survival, in speed, in stealth, in strategy. Antarctica was no longer a dinosaur's playground. It was a testing ground for the future. But the clock was ticking. Over millions of years, tectonic plates shifted. Continents drifted. And Antarctica began its slow journey to isolation. It moved south toward the pole. The temperatures dropped. Glaciers formed. Forests died. By 34 million years ago, Antarctica began freezing over for real. The mammals that once thrived fled or died. The lush green was swallowed by white, but not all was lost. Some stayed behind. Seals, whales, penguins, all evolved alongside the ice, adapted to the cold, owned the seas. The land may have gone silent again, but the ocean came alive. The end of one era had birthed another. Life didn't stop after the asteroid. It changed. It innovated. It thrived. And Antarctica? It held the scars and the seeds. Because beneath the ice lies a story of rebirth, a frozen phoenix that rose from extinction's fire. Before Antarctica froze, it was alive. Not just with trees and swamps, but with beasts, real, warm-blooded beasts. This was the age of the mammals, the rise of survivors, the era of quiet dominators. They didn't roar, they didn't stomp, but they conquered the ruins of a dinosaur world. Welcome to the Paleocene and Eocene epochs. Time frame: about 66 to 34 million years ago. Antarctica wasn't a freezer. It was lush, humid, forested. Think of it like modern-day New Zealand. Green valleys, flowing rivers, moss-covered trees. The perfect stage for mammals to evolve and rule. So, who were they? Start with marsupials. These weren't just the ancestors of kangaroos and koalas. Some were predators. Meat eaters with powerful jaws and razor teeth. Kind of like a saber-toothed kangaroo hybrid. Yeah, wild. Then came the placental mammals. Rodents, shrew-like creatures, tree climbers. They ate fruits, insects, maybe small lizards or birds. Fossils found in Antarctica suggest these mammals didn't just pass through. They thrived here, and they weren't alone. Picture massive flightless birds, taller than humans. Sharp beaks, muscular legs, hunters. They filled the apex predator role once held by raptors and tyrannosaurs. In the water, early whales swam the Antarctic coastlines. Still part walking, part swimming creatures, testing their evolutionary legs literally before becoming full marine giants. Add to that ancient relatives of seals and sea lions. They waddled onshore to rest, mated in mossy coves, and dove deep for fish. They were the early champions of cold adaptation. It was a rich, connected world. Back then, Antarctica wasn't isolated. It was still connected to South America and Australia. Animals could migrate, trade genes, evolve. Life flowed between continents like traffic on a superhighway. Antarctica was a bridge, a crossroads of evolution. Then things started shifting. Literally. Continents moved. Tectonic plates drifted apart. Antarctica began sliding toward the South Pole. Colder waters surrounded it. Ice caps formed. This was the beginning of the end for the mammals. Some tried to adapt. Thicker fur, more fat, different feeding habits. But most couldn't make the cut. As temperatures dropped, habitats shrank. Food sources disappeared. Species died out or fled north to warmer regions. And then came the tipping point, a complete severing from other continents. The Antarctic Circumpolar Current formed, a cold water conveyor belt that isolated the continent. It became a deep freeze, but evolution didn't quit. Those who could survive did. In the oceans, whales and seals flourished. Penguins exploded in diversity and size. On land, mammals vanished, but their legacy remained buried in bones, frozen in rock. Proof that Antarctica wasn't always a barren wasteland. It once pulsed with warm blood. Modern discoveries are still rewriting the story. Fossil sites like Seymour Island are revealing ancient jaws, limbs, and vertebrae. Pieces of animals we never imagined would live at the bottom of the world. Scientists even found extinct relatives of ungulate-shooved mammals, suggesting deer-like grazers once fed in the Antarctic forests. We're not just talking about a few fossils. We're talking about ecosystems, entire communities. Antarctica once nurtured life, big life, strange life. The kind of life that leaves behind secrets we're just beginning to understand. And if those fossils could talk, they'd tell us this continent had kings long before the ice claimed their throne. There was a time when Antarctica wasn't white. No ice sheets, no blizzards, just forests, rivers, and life. Then it all changed. Not in an instant, but slowly, relentlessly. A global shift that turned paradise into prison. This is the story of Earth's biggest cold snap. The moment Antarctica froze. Let's rewind 50 million years. Back then, Antarctica was a southern Eden. Warm, wet, alive. Plants thrived, mammals roamed, insects buzzed. It was Earth's natural greenhouse. But behind the scenes, the planet was rearranging the furniture. Tectonic plates shifted. Continents drifted apart. Ocean currents rerouted. And the isolation began. The key player, the Drake Passage. That narrow stretch of sea between South America and Antarctica. At one time, it didn't exist. The two land masses were fused together. Life could travel. Warm water could flow southward. But around 34 million years ago, a rift formed. Land pulled apart. Water rushed in. The Drake Passage was born. This changed everything. Cue the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, ACC. Think of it like a giant, icy racetrack of water circling Antarctica. Once the Drake Passage opened, cold water could wrap around the continent non-stop. Warm equatorial waters were blocked. Temperatures plummeted. It was like slamming Antarctica into a deep freezer. The ACC became Earth's most powerful current and its most dangerous. The freeze didn't just hit Antarctica. It sent shockwaves across the globe. Sea levels dropped. Ice sheets spread. Weather patterns shifted. Rainforests dried up. Grasslands emerged. New animals evolved to handle colder, tougher conditions. But nowhere felt the change like Antarctica. Plants began to die off first. Delicate species vanished. Then trees. Then mosses and ferns. Eventually, even the hardiest lichen gave up. Without plant life, herbivores starved. Carnivores followed. Mammals disappeared. Birds flew north. Only the ocean offered hope. Glaciers formed, slowly at first. Thin sheets crept across valleys, then thicker, colder, heavier. Eventually, Antarctica was buried under miles of ice. Mountains vanished beneath white walls. Rivers froze into stone. The continent was sealed in time. A fortress of frost. But here's the kicker. This wasn't a one-time event. Antarctica didn't freeze and stay frozen. There were ups and downs. Warm periods crept back in. Glaciers retreated, then returned. It was like Earth couldn't make up its mind. But overall, the trend was clear: colder, harsher, lonelier. And by 14 million years ago, the East Antarctic ice sheet had locked in. The largest single mass of ice on Earth. What caused all this? It wasn't just geography. CO2's levels in the atmosphere dropped. Volcanic activity played a part. Earth's tilt shifted slightly. Ocean salinity changed. All tiny puzzle pieces snapping into place. Nature didn't pick one reason. It threw everything into the mix. The result? A continent silenced by cold. A place where life once thrived now became alien. Dead quiet, deathly cold. And yet, the past never fully disappears. Beneath the ice, ancient lakes still pulse. Old rivers lie dormant. And locked in that frozen tomb clues. Fossils, DNA, sediments, secrets. Everything life once was buried, but not forgotten. This freeze created more than just Antarctica. It shaped our entire planet. It changed the evolution of life. It made room for humans, eventually. But first, it wiped the slate clean. You think Antarctica's dead? Think again. Beneath the frozen surface, past layers of ice thicker than skyscrapers, there's life. Not big, not flashy, but very much alive and ancient. This is where science meets sci-fi. Because the things living under Antarctica, they shouldn't even exist. Let's start with Lake Vostok. Buried under 2.5 miles of solid ice, this massive subglacial lake is the size of Lake Ontario. And for over 15 million years, it's been completely sealed off from the outside world. No sunlight, no fresh air, just crushing pressure, frigid temps, and eternal darkness. A frozen tomb, right? Wrong. When Russian scientists finally drilled down in 2012, what they found shocked everyone. Microbes, thriving, flourishing, evolving, in total isolation. How do they survive? They don't rely on sunlight like most life. They've hacked the system. These extremophiles feed on minerals, gases, and even radioactive decay. Yep, some of them can process radiation. Others thrive on sulfur or iron scraped from rock below. Some live off methane and carbon trapped in the ice. They've made life possible in the most impossible conditions. And it's not just Lake Vostok. There are over 400 subglacial lakes under Antarctica, many of them connected by hidden rivers. This isn't just frozen wasteland, it's an underground water network. A cold, dark, wet highway stretching across the continent. Researchers have already found microbial life in Lake Whillans and Lake Mercer. Each lake hosts its own isolated ecosystem, which means we're just scratching the surface. Why does this matter? Because if life can survive, hair cut off for millions of years, then life could survive anywhere. Mars, Europa, Enceladus. These icy worlds might have oceans beneath their frozen shells. And thanks to Antarctica, we now know those oceans could host life. Earth's South Pole is the ultimate alien test lab. And every microbe found down there is a hint that we might not be alone in the universe. Some microbes down there haven't changed in millions of years. They're time capsules, living fossils. Their DNA tells us what life looked like before humans were even a thought. Others are completely new species no one's ever seen before. Undocumented, undiscovered, untamed. Every sample scientists pull up rewrites our understanding of biology. But here's the twist. These life forms aren't just surviving. They're influencing the ice above them. Microbial activity can generate heat. It can shift sediment. It can even help ice flow faster or slower. In other words, the smallest organisms in Antarctica can shape the entire continent. Now, here's the kicker: these ecosystems are fragile. One wrong move during a drill, one contaminated instrument, and we could ruin them forever. That's why scientists are approaching them like sacred ground. Sterile tools, robotic instruments, laser precision. It's not just about studying life, it's about preserving it. Because once we destroy it, we'll never get it back. This hidden world changes how we define life. No sun, no plants, no oxygen in the way we know it. But life found a way, and not just barely. It thrives under the most extreme conditions on Earth. It rewrites the rule book of biology, and it gives us hope that if life can survive Antarctica, then it can survive almost anywhere. Picture this: towering trees, ferns the size of your living room, swamps buzzing with life. No, this isn't the Amazon. This is Antarctica. Yep. The coldest, driest, most lifeless continent today was once a lush, green paradise. And the proof? It's right under our feet: fossil forests frozen in time. Let's rewind the clock. Go back 90 million years. The age of dinosaurs. Back then, Antarctica wasn't at the bottom of the world. It sat further north, part of a massive supercontinent called Gondwana. The climate? Warm, humid, subtropical. No ice caps, no glaciers, just rivers, lakes, and endless greenery. In 2017, scientists drilled deep into the West Antarctic ice sheet. What they found stunned everyone. Layers of sediment, preserved roots, pollen, even ancient soil structure. These weren't just impressions in stone. This was an actual forest floor, frozen in time, untouched for nearly 100 million years. Analysis showed evidence of a dense, temperate rainforest, like what you'd see in modern New Zealand or Chile. But here's the mind-blower. This forest grew near the South Pole, which means these plants endured months of darkness every year. No sunlight, no photosynthesis, no warmth. How did they survive? Scientists believe Antarctica was warmed by greenhouse gases, a natural heat trap amplified by intense volcanic activity. The warmth was so intense that even polar winters couldn't kill the ecosystem. It was a biological miracle. And a warning: these fossil forests tell a bigger story. They reveal a planet in flux, constantly shifting between fire and ice. They show that Antarctica hasn't always been a frozen wasteland. And they prove that climate, no matter how extreme today, can flip fast. We've also found fossilized logs with tree rings. What do they tell us? That these trees didn't just grow, they thrived. They grew fast, tall, and adapted to harsh polar light cycles. Some had no rings at all, meaning they grew continuously, no seasons, just constant growth. Others show signs of stress, like sudden cooling events or fire damage. Nature left a record of its chaos and its resilience. But the forest isn't just trees. Researchers have uncovered fossilized ferns, mosses, and seed-bearing plants, even insect traces. Each discovery paints a fuller picture of this lost ecosystem. It was vibrant, complex, and interconnected. The deeper we dig, the more life we uncover. And here's where it gets chilling. These ancient forests vanished when Earth's climate began to cool. Carbon dioxide dropped. Ice started creeping in. Eventually, the continent froze over, completely trapping everything in silence. Now, as CO2's levels rise again, Antarctica's ancient green past feels more like a prophecy than a history lesson. Because what once was green could be again. So what do these fossil forests teach us? That Earth has been here before. That radical climate swings aren't just theory, they're carved into the ground. And that even the most barren landscapes can hold stories of life and abundance. Antarctica isn't just about extinction. It's about rebirth, transformation, and forgotten worlds. The ice hides a jungle, and that jungle speaks volumes. Antarctica, we see it now as a frozen, silent world. But it wasn't always like that. Before the ice took over, this place pulsed with life. And like every thriving land, it had one thing: rivers. Not trickles, not glacial melt. Massive, thundering rivers wide as the Mississippi, flowing freely across a green, forested land. Let's go back, way back, 40 to 100 million years ago. Antarctica wasn't a dead zone. It had rain, seasons, and rivers that carved canyons, carried sediment, and shaped valleys still hidden beneath the ice. We're talking about a prehistoric plumbing system, buried under kilometers of glacial cover. But thanks to radar imaging and seismic scans, we can now map these ancient pathways. And they tell one hell of a story. Meet the ghost rivers. One is the Foundation Trough. Another, the Patuxent Trough. Then, there's the mighty Ferrigno Rift. These aren't cracks in ice. They're ancient riverbeds. Some of them run for hundreds of kilometers. Wider than the Thames, deeper than the Grand Canyon. Each one a scar left behind by water that once gave life. But why do these rivers matter? Because they explain everything. They tell us how life once spread across this land. How forests drank. How animals migrated. How sediment moved. Without rivers, there's no life. And the presence of these ancient waterways proves that Antarctica wasn't just habitable, it was thriving. Scientists have even found deltas. Deltas. That means these rivers weren't just internal. They flowed to the coast, pouring into vast, open seas. Fresh water mixed with salt. Swamps formed. Food chains exploded with activity. Picture it. Giant amphibians lounging by the water. Prehistoric birds diving for fish. Trees lining the banks like a green wall. That's the Antarctica we're talking about. And then the climate flipped. Temperatures dropped. Rain turned to snow. Snow never melted. Rivers froze. Life retreated. The veins of the continent shut down, and the land went silent. But those rivers, they didn't disappear. They're still there, fossilized under the ice. Proof of the world that once was. Now here's the wild part. Underneath all that ice, some rivers might still be flowing. Wait, what? Yep. Modern subglacial rivers. Lake Vostok, Lake Whillans. Scientists have discovered over 400 hidden lakes beneath the ice. Many are connected by flowing water. This means Antarctica's heart is still beating, just very, very quietly. Why does that matter today? Because these buried rivers control how the ice moves. They lubricate the base of the ice sheet, speeding up glaciers, feeding melt, raising sea levels. Ancient rivers are now part of a modern crisis. And understanding them, it could help us predict the future. But there's something poetic about it too. These ancient waterways, dry for millions of years, still shape the land above them. They carved valleys. They built ecosystems. And now they influence the very ice that buried them. The past and present, locked in a strange, frozen dance. Antarctica's ancient rivers remind us of something powerful. Nothing stays frozen forever. Not even history. Beneath the silence lies motion. Beneath the ice, stories still flow. You just have to know where to look. Close your eyes. Forget the Antarctica you know. Forget the cold, the wind, the silence. Now picture this. A wide river snakes through the valley. Its banks are lined with towering conifers. The air is warm, damp, buzzing with life. And just below the surface, a whole ecosystem is in motion. This was Antarctica before the freeze. And its rivers weren't just water. They were lifelines. Where there's water, there's life. And these ancient rivers were no exception. They hosted a parade of prehistoric creatures, some unlike anything we've ever seen again. Let's start with the swimmers. Early amphibians, massive, armored and built like tanks. Creatures like Kulasuchus, a predator with a head like a manhole cover, lurking beneath the water's surface. Fish everywhere. Bony fish, jawless fish, lungfish species that could walk on land and breathe air. Some were covered in heavy scales like armor. Others, sleek and fast, darting through reeds in search of prey. And the rivers didn't stop at fish. Aquatic reptiles ruled the scene too. Mosasaurs didn't swim here, but plesiosaurs might have. Long-necked giants, gliding through brackish estuaries, hunting like crocodiles on a buffet run. Smaller reptiles like early Nothosaurus slipped between the river and sea, equally at home in both. But it wasn't just about who lived in the water. The banks were buzzing too. Imagine giant insects the size of your forearm, beetles, dragonflies, and strange winged creatures we haven't even named yet. Frogs croaked in the shadows. Tiny lizards darted between ferns. And in the trees, early birds. Not like robins or sparrows. We're talking proto-birds with claws on their wings and teeth in their beaks. Feathered dinosaurs probably hunted here too, stalking the edges of the water like velociraptors in a lost jungle. Then come the giants. Titanosaurs and hadrosaurs didn't walk this far south, but smaller herbivores? Absolutely. Think early Antarctopelta or Cryolophosaurozone of the earliest carnivorous dinosaurs found in Antarctica. They hunted by the rivers, drank from them, nested close to their shores. This wasn't some empty wilderness. This was a hub of life. And the plant life? Insane. Antarctica's ancient rivers were shaded by podocarps, southern beeches, and tree ferns. Thick mosses blanketed the ground. Flowering plants bloomed in the underbrush. This was a rainforest, just one anchored by flowing water. These plants supported entire food webs, from insects to birds to dinosaurs. And their fossilized remains still whisper the story. Pollen grains, leaf imprints, petrified wood. The evidence is everywhere if you know where to dig. But then came the cold. As the continent drifted further south, temperatures dropped. Rain became snow. Snow never melted. And the rivers, once bustling with life, froze over. Species vanished. Forests collapsed. Creatures that thrived for millions of years disappeared in the blink of geologic time. But under the ice, the bones remained. Fossils frozen in layers of sediment, perfectly preserved snapshots of ancient river life. Why does this matter today? Because it proves one thing. Antarctica was a cradle of life. Not just a desert of ice. Not just a remote corner of Earth. But a key piece of the evolutionary puzzle. These rivers fed ecosystems, hosted species found nowhere else, and shaped life for millions of years. Understanding them means rewriting everything we thought we knew about prehistoric Earth. And who knows? Maybe deeper under the ice, more creatures wait to be discovered. Skeletons with stories. Fossils that defy science. Whispers of a time when the coldest place on Earth was one of the most alive. It didn't happen in an instant. There was no earthquake, no explosion, no dramatic moment where Antarctica just snapped away from the rest of the world. But it did drift, and it changed everything. Let's rewind the clock. Once, all land was one. A supercontinent Gondwana, colossal jigsaw puzzle of future continents. South America, Africa, India, Australia, and Antarctica. They were connected. Sharing species, sharing climates, sharing destiny. But the Earth's crust is restless. Tectonic plates move, and over millions of years, those plates pushed and pulled Gondwana apart. Antarctica began its slow escape. First, Africa drifted north, then India, then Australia peeled off and took the marsupials with it. Finally, Antarctica was left behind, cold, isolated, and cut off. But this wasn't just a breakup. This was a reset. When Antarctica separated, it set off a domino effect. New ocean currents formed. Climates shifted. Species became stranded or extinct. And the planet we know today, it started to take shape. Let's break down what happened. When Australia drifted north, it opened up the Tasman Gateway, a passage between the two continents. Water rushed through. Currents changed course. Warmer waters could no longer reach Antarctica. Then came the Drake Passage, when South America split. Now, the Southern Ocean could swirl around Antarctica freely. A powerful loop called the Antarctic Circumpolar Current formed. And just like that, Antarctica became a cold trap. Warmth couldn't get in. Cold couldn't escape. This new isolation was the beginning of the deep freeze. But it didn't just freeze the continent. It rewired Earth's entire climate system. Ocean temperatures dropped. Global weather patterns shifted. Ice sheets began to form, not just in Antarctica but in the Arctic too. The Ice Age didn't begin with snow, it began with tectonics. So, what about life? Everything changed. Species that once thrived together were now split. Antarctica's lush forests? Gone. The dinosaurs and crocodile-like predators? Extinct or scattered. Only the toughest survived, burrowing birds, early ancestors of penguins, and microbes clinging to life beneath the ice. Meanwhile, life elsewhere was evolving in different directions. Australia became a land of marsupials. Africa gave rise to early humans. South America became a jungle of unique mammals, all because the land tore apart. The drift didn't just move land, it sculpted evolution. And it's still happening. Antarctica's still moving slowly. The plates beneath us never stop. Continents will meet again. Maybe even form another supercontinent in the far future. But for now, Antarctica remains the loner. Frozen, mysterious, watching from the bottom of the world. And we're still uncovering the scars. Scientists study rift valleys, magnetic striping in ocean floors, and fossil trails across continents, all to map how it happened. Because understanding Antarctica's drift helps us understand everything: climate change, evolution, ocean currents, and even future tectonic shifts. It's not just history, it's the Earth's blueprint. And maybe the most mind-blowing part? None of this was random. Every inch Antarctica moved shaped the past and will shape the future. It's easy to think of Antarctica as a lifeless, frozen desert. But buried beneath miles of ice are clues. Clues to a time when the continent was alive, with warm-blooded survivors. Yes, mammals. Actual, fur-covered, warm-blooded creatures. In Antarctica. Living, breathing, thriving, until they didn't. Before the ice claimed the land, there was a narrow window. A twilight era. After the dinosaurs had vanished. Before the glaciers sealed everything in. This was when the last warm-blooded survivors roamed the southern tip of the world. And thanks to fossils, we know who they were. Let's go back around 55 million years. The Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. It was hot. Really hot. Rainforests covered Antarctica. Temperatures were tropical, even polar nights didn't drop below freezing. It was the perfect breeding ground for resilient life. And out of that warmth, mammals took over. Scientists have uncovered remarkable fossils in Seymour Island, near the Antarctic Peninsula. Here, hidden in the frozen rock, are bones of marsupials, hoofed mammals, and even early primates. They weren't alone. They shared their home with massive flightless birds, turtles, and ancient crocodile-like reptiles. But the mammals were different. They had a secret weapon, endothermith, ability to regulate body heat. This gave them a shot when the world began to cool. But cooling was relentless. As Antarctica drifted south and the circumpolar current formed, warm currents stopped flowing in. The rainforests thinned. The air dried. Frost came creeping in. Mammals retreated northward to warmer lands. One by one, they disappeared from Antarctica. But a few clung on, and their fossils prove it. Among the most stunning finds is the Antarctic marsupial. It resembled its cousins in South America. Think of it as a tiny prehistoric opossum. It nested in trees, ate insects and fruit, and may have survived the early chills by hibernating or finding shelter underground. Then there's Antarctodon, a strange hoofed creature related to ungulates. It walked the shrinking forests on thick legs, foraging for plants. Its fossilized teeth reveal a slow, grinding diatone suited to a land that was changing under its feet. And maybe most shocking of all, some researchers believe early primates once lived here. Yes, distant cousins of humans living at the edge of the world. But nature doesn't tolerate hesitation. The freeze came fast. Ice sheets swallowed the forests. The mammal kingdom collapsed. And for nearly 40 million years after, no mammals would walk Antarctica again. But their fossils stayed, waiting, preserved in stone, like messages from the last generation. Each bone tells a story of resilience and extinction, of life clinging to hope in the face of an unstoppable freeze. And today, those bones are rewriting what we thought we knew. Fossils from Seymour Island reveal that Antarctica wasn't just a prehistoric jungle. It was a biological bridge between South America and Australia. Species didn't just live there, they migrated through it. Antarctica was the crossroads of evolution, a warm-blooded freeway, until the ice shut it down forever. And yet, the mammal's story doesn't end in Antarctica. Their descendants live on across the globe, in rainforests, deserts, cities, even in us. They fled the ice, but their legacy survived. Today, paleontologists continue to dig literally, chipping through frost and rock to recover the story of Earth's last wild frontier. Because every fossil is a time capsule, every discovery, a whisper from a world almost forgotten. Penguins, the tuxedoed icons of the cold. But here's the plot twist. They didn't start in the cold at all. Their story begins millions of years before Antarctica was buried under ice, back when it was still green, lush, tropical. And penguins? They were giants. Let's rewind to around 60 million years ago, right after the mass extinction that wiped out the dinosaurs. The skies were clearing, the oceans were teeming, and the air was warm even in Antarctica. That's when the earliest ancestors of penguins gave up flight. Not because they were weak, but because they saw opportunity. Why fly when you can swim faster than anything else? Enter Waimanu, the OG penguin. Discovered in New Zealand, Waimanu looked awkward. A stubby beak, short wings already turning into flippers. It didn't waddle like modern penguins, it probably walked more like a duck. But in the water, it moved like a missile. And soon, its descendants made their way south, to a tropical Antarctica that offered safety, rich fishing grounds, and no predators. A perfect storm for evolution. What came next? The rise of giants. Meet Paleodyptes klekowskii, a beast of a bird, over 6 feet tall, weighing 250 pounds. Imagine a penguin that could look you in the eye and then chase you through the surf. This wasn't just a bird. It was a marine predator. Its fossils, found on Seymour Island, prove just how massive prehistoric penguins got. Why so big? Simple. Bigger body, better heat retention in chilly waters. And with no land predators, there was no need to stay small or swift on land. They were built for one thing: dominating the ocean. But as Antarctica shifted, so did the game. The continent drifted farther south. Ocean currents changed. The climate cooled. Fish populations moved. And the penguins? They adapted again. Over time, they got smaller, more specialized. Giant penguins started vanishing. But the ones that survived became faster, sleeker, and better suited for colder seas. They weren't just surviving. They were evolving into the penguins we recognize today. Let's talk tactics. Penguins traded flight for underwater agility. Their wings morphed into flippers. Feathers turned into tiny scales, trapping air to keep them warm. Their bones, dense, to avoid floating and dive deeper. They weren't clumsy. They were engineered, built by evolution to dive faster, deeper, and longer than most birds ever could. Modern penguins owe it all to those ancient survivors. Adelie, Chinstrap, Emperor, they all walk the paths laid by giants. But they're the product of millennia of harsh training. Every generation tested by ice, predators, and shifting oceans. Their ancestors once stood as tall as humans. Now, they thrive in 50-degree Celsius, huddling against blizzards like warriors in armor. But penguins didn't just survive, they became the face of Antarctica. They carved out an empire where few animals dare live. Their colonies are kingdoms. Their dives, poetry in motion. And their origin story? A tale of flightless rebels who rewrote the rules of what it means to be a bird. From tropical waters to frozen tundra. From giants to sleek torpedoes. Penguins rose and stayed. Because when nature slammed the door on flight, they dove into greatness. Picture the ocean 50 million years ago. Vast, wild, buzzing with new life. And into this prehistoric chaos came giants. Not the kind with claws or teeth that walked the earth, but the kind that moved silently through the deep. Whales. Let's set the scene. The dinosaurs were long gone. The birds had taken to the skies. And the oceans? They were waiting for a new ruler. That ruler came in the form of Archaeocetus, the earliest whales. They didn't look like today's blue whales or orcas. No, these guys were something in between. Half wolf, half seal, full predator. Imagine a creature with a crocodile snout, flippers instead of paws, and a hunger for flesh. This was Basilosaurus, the king lizard of the sea, though. It wasn't a lizard at all. At up to 60 feet long, it swam the warm, ancient oceans, including those washing up on the tropical shores of ancient Antarctica. Why did whales move south? Simple. Food. Space. Less competition. Antarctica's waters were rich with krill, fish, and squid, and the warmth made it a perfect seasonal hunting ground. Plus, there weren't any massive marine reptiles left to fight with. Just wide-open ocean and opportunity. As millions of years passed, whales evolved. They split into two camps. Toothed whales, like early ancestors of orcas and dolphins, built to hunt. Baleen whales, the filter feeders, built for efficiency. And here's where it gets wild. Those filter feeders got big. Really big. We're talking blue whale levels, the largest animals Earth has ever seen. And where did some of them thrive? Antarctica's nutrient-rich waters. See, when Antarctica began to cool around 34 million years ago, something dramatic happened. The Antarctic Circumpolar Current formed. It circled the continent, trapping cold water and creating upwelling zones, underwater elevators that pulled nutrients to the surface. These nutrients fed plankton, which fed krill, which fed whales. An entire food chain powered by ice. Whales didn't just survive the cooling of Antarctica, they capitalized on it. They migrated long distances following the food. Some traveled thousands of miles from tropical breeding grounds to Antarctic feeding zones. And during that icy summer buffet, they grew. They bulked up. They ruled. But let's not pretend it was all smooth sailing. As ice sheets grew, life got tougher. Some whale species went extinct. Others adapted their migratory patterns. Some evolved to use sonar to navigate the increasingly dark and frigid waters. Meanwhile, predators like early orcas and giant sharks, including the legendary megalodon, emerged to challenge the dominance of filter feeders. The Antarctic wasn't just a buffet. It was a battlefield. Still, whales persisted. Because the Antarctic offered something unique. Consistency. The cold. The currents. The krill. Every year, without fail, it delivered. And so these giants kept coming back. Today, you can still see humpbacks, minks, and blue whales diving through Antarctic seas. Echoes of that ancient migration. Carriers of a lineage that started millions of years ago when the South called and the giants answered. From warm-blooded hunters to peaceful plankton filters, whales didn't just enter Antarctic history. They shaped it. They became part of its rhythm, its heartbeat, its soul. Forget Hollywood. This isn't your average sea monster story. This is a real, ancient rivalry played out in the cold, dark depths of prehistoric oceans. And the southern waters near Antarctica, they were one of the arenas. Two apex predators. Both giants, both deadly. Meet Megalodon and Leviathan. Let's start with Megalodon. Roughly 60 feet of pure muscle and bite force. Imagine a great white shark on steroids. This wasn't just a predator. It was the predator. With teeth the size of bananas and a jaw that could crush a car, Megalodon hunted whales for breakfast. Its domain, global oceans, including warmer stretches near prehistoric Antarctica before the ice took over. But Megalodon wasn't alone. Enter Leviathan Melville, named after the biblical beast, and Herman Melville, author of Moby Dick. Because yeah, it earned that kind of respect. Leviathan was a sperm whale with teeth, massive, bone-crushing, interlocking teeth, up to 60 feet long, just like Megalodon. But this whale didn't just eat squid. It hunted other whales. And yes, possibly even went head-to-head with Megalodon. They lived around the same time, in the same waters, hunting the same prey. That means only one thing. Conflict was inevitable. Let's break it down. Megalodon's advantages: speed, bite force, surprise attacks from below. Leviathan's strengths: intelligence, echolocation, brutal, tooth-to-tooth combat. They weren't stalking each other every day. But when territories crossed or prey was scarce, the battle was on. One massive shadow emerging from the deep, the other answering with clicks and tail slaps. Jaws versus skull. Flesh and fury in motion. Picture the Antarctic Ocean, a little warmer than today. A pod of primitive whales glides through the blue. Then chaos. From below, Megalodon bursts upward, aiming for the gut. But just as it strikes, Leviathan barrels in, slamming the shark sideways with sheer bulk. It's not just a fight. It's survival. That's the level of intensity these creatures brought. Now here's the twist. They didn't coexist for long. Climate change began cooling the planet. Antarctica's waters grew colder. Ice started creeping in. Leviathan disappeared first, likely due to changing prey availability. Megalodon held on longer, adapting, but eventually fell too, as oceans cooled and food grew scarce. The end wasn't an epic battle. It was nature pulling the plug. But for the time they shared the ocean, it was a prehistoric arms race. Two apex monsters, neither backing down, both shaping the marine food chain. And while fossils rarely show battle scars, bite marks on whale bones hint at their legacy. A missing chunk here, a shattered rib there. Clues to a forgotten war in the deep. So, next time you think of ancient Antarctica, don't just think ice. Think blood. Think thunderous impacts in black water. Think titans. Because before it was a frozen desert, it was a coliseum of monsters. Before the snow fell endlessly, before Antarctica froze into silence, its skies, they screamed. Massive wings cut through cold winds. Predators patrolled from above. And beneath them, ancient ecosystem watched the skies in fear. This was a time when birds ruled the south. Let's set the stage. Forget the modern penguins. These were not the clumsy waddlers we know today. We're talking about giants, like Pelagornis sandertia seabird, with a wingspan of 20 to 24 feet. That's nearly as wide as a small aircraft. It soared over vast oceans, gliding effortlessly, riding thermals across the southern hemisphere. Its skeleton, hollow and lightweight. Its beak, filled with bony, tooth-like projections perfect for gripping slippery prey. Yeah, this bird meant business. But Pelagornis wasn't alone. There were early ancestors of modern-day geese, albatrosses, and ducks flapping across prehistoric Antarctic skies. Back then, the continent had lakes, rivers, forests. It wasn't a frozen tomb, it was teeming with life. And the birds? They adapted fast. Some perched in the trees. Some dove into water. Others, like Vagavis, even vocalized like ducks, calling across ancient wetlands. Now, let's get to the real wild card. Terror birds. Did they reach Antarctica? Well, that's still debated. But some theories suggest that during warmer periods, Forus racids, giant, flightless predators, might have crossed into southern land masses. If they did, they would have stalked prey with razor-sharp beaks and powerful legs. Running, chasing, hunting, on a continent that hadn't yet gone cold. Birds weren't just passive players in this world. They were key predators, essential parts of the ecosystem. They nested in coastal cliffs. They scavenged the shores. Some hunted fish with pinpoint dives. Others cruised across inland lakes. Their feathers were adapted for colder temperatures. Their bones evolved for endurance. This wasn't just survival. This was domination from above. Then came the cold. Not all at once, but creeping, season by season. Ice began to spread. Forests thinned. Prey became scarce. Some birds, like Pelagornis, vanished. Too specialized. Too massive. Others adapted. Shrank. Evolved into species we know today. That's where modern penguins enter. Smaller, streamlined, built for icy dives, not flight. The age of air superiority faded, but their legacy didn't. Fossils tell the story. Wings wider than cars, skulls with ridged jaws, feathers imprinted into stone. Every layer of sediment reveals a sky that was once alive with motion. a sky filled with shadows and cries and hunger. They ruled the air, while dinosaurs stomped the land and predators lurked in the sea. They were the last true aviators of a wild Antarctica. So when you look up at a cold, clear Antarctic sky today, imagine it. Wings slicing the air, predators circling, a shadow falling over the waves. That's the world that came before. A world where the skies were never quiet. This is it. The end of the line. But the truth? It never really ends. Because even now, under the crushing silence of Antarctica's ice, the past still whispers. It hides in bones buried deep, in frozen sediments, in cliffs carved by time. Every fossil we find, it's not just ancient tits alive with information. Antarctica isn't just a frozen wasteland. It's a time capsule, and it's only just beginning to open up. We've uncovered giant amphibians that ruled swampy plains, crocodilian relatives lurking in prehistoric rivers, dinosaurs adapted for darkness and chill, flying giants that soared over primeval seas, and ancient forests once filled with buzzing insects and birdsong. But for every discovery made, there are hundreds still locked away beneath the ice. Why does this matter? Because every bone tells a story, a warning, a lesson, a key to understanding Earth's future hidden in its most extreme past. Climate change? Antarctica's prehistoric shifts are like a manual for survival and collapse. Mass extinctions? They've happened before. Understanding how life rebounded could be what saves ours. And evolution? Down here, it played on hard mode. Only the strongest, the smartest, the most adaptable survived. There's wisdom buried in this ice. The deeper we dig, the more human this story becomes. It's not just about ancient reptiles or giant birds. It's about resilience, change, rebirth. And this story is far from over. New tech is changing the game. Drones, satellites, ground-penetrating radar, they're revealing entire hidden landscapes beneath the surface. Vast valleys, fossil beds, lost rivers. We're on the edge of the next great wave of discovery. And guess what? You're a part of it. If this journey through Antarctica's lost worlds opened your eyes, don't let it end here. Subscribe, share, and join us. Because the next fossil, the next discovery, the next chapter of Earth's story is coming sooner than you think. Be there when we dig it up. You've just traveled through 180+ million years, across jungles and volcanoes, through ice ages and extinctions, from the shadows of titanosaurs to the feathers of sky kings. This wasn't just a documentary. This was a time machine. Now ask yourself, what else is out there? What hasn't been found? And what might we still learn from the beasts beneath the ice? So here's the call. Stay curious. Ask questions. Support the science. Share the stories. Because when we uncover the past, we're not just digging up bones. We're digging up truth. Antarctica isn't just frozen. It's waiting. And somewhere, beneath the frost, the next revelation sleeps. Let's go wake it up.